of Trendz talks. As you know, we have been doing these sessions during the pandemic, wherein we have been roping people from different walks of life to help and guide us through these tough times. So it's been a big journey for us and a landmark of sorts, wherein we have read 50 sessions. And talking about journeys, we have somebody who's having a journey of a different kind. He's going to talk about his journey as a conceptual artist, and none other than Hetal Shukla. He's been working with different multinationals, be it with Times of India, Google, Cadbury's, to name a few. He specializes in uh, site-specific installations. And to talk about his background, he's been studying with Ratna Sansad and then moved over to uh, London to pursue his further studies. He's come back to India, and for the past 25 years, he's worked for more than 5,000 projects himself. So just to guide and give us an insight, it's over to Hetal to take it further.
Hi, boss. Happy to have you here, and I'm so glad to connect with you again after so many years. I remember our sort of a friends group at the Khalsa College when we were studying at Khalsa College, 11th and 12th, and after that, almost like 25 years after, or maybe more, 30 years after that, we're connecting now. So thank you for inviting me to Trendz Talk. And like we were discussing on the phone, and then you said, why don't you share these sort of your journey with Trendz Talk? So I remember you asking me about the childhood, and so basically, I've always lived in the other Parsi colony, and we belong to a family of pujaris from a temple. Even though our ancestors were into sort of rituals and performing puja from the temple, my grandfather was a little offbeat in thinking, and he left the practice of being a priest to become an editor and photographer, and finally he opened a company for film publicity. This is during the silent era when the films never had sound in them. That's the time he had to kind of create massive banners and posters which were actually hand painted and cards. So that's the kind of lineage and art I come from. My father studied architecture, also a brilliant artist, and he's been my inspiration. And I remember asking him, when did you really see me as an artist? So I remember him saying that one morning I had a chalk in my hand, like a really huge chalk. And we have a long veranda. The veranda must be almost about close to 80 feet, or I think 80 to 90 feet long. So, I was drawing something, and he said what he noticed there is usually kids would draw something which is inside of their vision code, almost like a 4 or 5 feet. That's the maximum a kid would go to in terms of the size of the illustration. But my dad said, what I really noticed interesting about you is that you went all the way from the start to the end of the veranda. And what I had done that time is a chalk drawing of a huge kind of a snake, like an anaconda, which is swirling and so so that's something which he found interesting. And I have a really faint memory of this activity that I must have done. But now if I connect to it to what I do now is site specific. So my work is related to the space and the dynamics of the space. And if I go back to my childhood and what I'd done then was like a really long snake that I'd selected as an element, which suits that long veranda. And it was kind of, swirling. So I was also trying to fill the width of the veranda as well as the length with that illustration. So I think, from that point, this whole idea of dealing with the space and art must have started in a very subtle way, which I didn't know. I grew up in a very humble environment, but with most of the neighbors being our relatives, and it was almost like an extended family space where we were, and we would play in the temple, in the complex of the temple. So even these rituals and practices were not alien to me, because we were right behind. So went to school. School was great. School gave me opportunities to perform, and when you do something, an assignment well in the drawing class, you kind of become a star. So I had these glimpses of sort of mini school, that if you're able to sketch something nicely or color something nicely, you get a lot of attention. So that's where I felt that this was one subject where, I could create anything that I wanted, and I was quite good at it also. So that was my school story. Then cut to Khalsa College. Khalsa College 11th and 12th standard. And so that was in science. So science biology was my favorite subject because there were illustrations, and I really enjoyed doing illustrations and filling up the journal. But apart from that, I didn't find much time to do sort of my art practice. Now, after the 12th standard, I was keen on pursuing art and design. And that's when I joined some entrance classes for architecture and stuff. I ended up at the School of Interior Design. After I passed out the School of Interior Design, I went on to pursue art. But when I came out of the School of Interior Design, I saw that interior design and struggle to be again find my niche there. And what really struck me is when an architect or an interior designer works on a space, the art element comes in the end in that space. So visually, it's an important and a striking element, but in those days, it was a last moment struggle that the architects and interior designers would sort of engage in. So last moment, they would try to find some art and fit into a blank space. And I saw a gap there that if I understand the space and the interior well, I can bring in the art solutions right in the beginning of the project. So it is in sync with the whole space and the theme and even the color scheme. So that's what I started propagating and educating and talking about with the architects. And that started my journey as a conceptual artist, where I started conceptualizing artwork for even spaces. So first 3 years were a big struggle because it's difficult for architects to employ me from their side and part with their fees as my consulting fees, because none of the clients had ever heard of this kind of a thing before. So clients were also not ready to have another sort of a consultant into the picture because they were already paying an architect. So it was kind of a struggle to how to monetize this thing. But still, it was my passion, so I would keep meeting architects, give them ideas and solutions, and it was more of a friendly thing. But when it came to monetizing this whole kind of a service, a friendly service, it was a big question mark. And then, we were offered some of the other things for execution as a barter. So we started doing barter of, giving ideation and getting some execution contract of that particular interior item, be it, metal artwork, metal furniture, sometimes something that's a little wacky and out of the box is something we would execute and, try to monetize that. And this worked really well. So I remember one of the first projects that we got was a nightclub in Kolhapur called Cyberspace. So this was a nightclub in Kolhapur. It was a part of a Victor Palace hotel. And do we have that image of cyberspace here? So this particular nightclub was and we ended up doing the theming and the artwork. It was almost like we went to meet him and he urgently had his presentation in Kolhapur after 2 days. So within 2 days, we were able to generate the ideation and actually go and present it there, and the job was confirmed. And there was a limited budget time, but we managed to finish it. And to my surprise, this project actually won an award that particular year at the IIID, the Indian Institute of Interior Designers. And this place, being in Kolhapur, it won award against all the other nightclubs in Bombay, Delhi, and metro cities. So that was like a big encouragement for us, and kept on taking more of such projects till another landmark project that we got was called the Planet M in the Times of India building. This was one more iconic project because it was conceptualized as a music store, but music is usually related with nature and stuff. But this was supposed to be music right in the center of the city. So we brought in the elements of the cities like the bridges and roadways and stuff like that, and fused them with musical instruments in the mural, making them tunnels, and violin becoming sort of a road, and the trumpet becoming the tunnel, and piano becoming again a kind of a zebra crossing and stuff like that. And this was like a very big hit. So Planet M gave us another level of boost, and we, started working on more work then. About 4 or 5 years of work. Today I'm done with almost 5,000 projects, but back then we also got an opportunity to. So this was basically into entering into the commercial sort of retail space, and then we got into IT space when Google entered in. So the very first Google office of India in Hyderabad was a new opportunity that I got. So I was given like 5 minutes to present the idea at the Google office, and quite nervous because it was an international big name giant that time, and we had a lot of other agencies also pitching for the same work. But it so happened that I could finish my presentation within like 3 or 4 minutes, and within 5 minutes, the person who had come from New York, he kind of agreed on hiring me to do the art, and we created the art consistent with the brand. Google was a place where I started becoming more aware of the branding as well, where I started connecting my art with the brand identity and basically the essence of the brand. that again became a big hit and ended up doing most of the works with Google in India today. Now, this was going well, but I always had an urge of kind of creating my own artwork, which is almost like a poem that you write. And that's when at Kalagoda Festival, which is a festival right on the street, I did one installation called the Polar Bear. I had a new car with me. It was an ambassador car. So ambassador car has always fascinated me because I'm a 70s kid, grown up with these memories of, an Amitabh Bachchan driving an ambassador car. So it was kind of a heroic sort of a car. You might say a sort of Rolls Royce in those days. It was like a rich man's car. And then later on, it became the car for politicians. I think even prime ministers have used this car. And then finally the taxi. But ambassador has always had was always considered a notch above the regular sort of Fiats, and even after the Maruti came in, ambassador still had its own standing. So I had bought the second-hand ambassador, and I loved it so much that I wanted it to take sort of an interesting avatar. So I created this piece called the Polar Bear. So this was entirely covered with white fur, a white ambassador covered with white fur, and it was called as the Polar Bear. So it was drawing parallels between the natural environment and the city, an element from sort of a man-made world, which is an ambassador car, and a polar bear, an element from the nature, both sort of collapse into this artwork together. It's drawing a parallel between these two and comparing that both are into extinction. So even ambassador was into extinction those days because newer cars had come in, and it was still there, standing strong, but into extinction. So this kind of talks about the parallel evolution of human life as well as the nature, So yeah, so this was my first exhibition at Kalagoda, and fur was really, I felt it made a really grand statement because it was talking of an interesting story. It was connecting with the nature, as well as it had this piece had tactile value, which means a lot of people love touching it. So I had actually seen, people in the morning walking into Kalagoda with their briefcase and a tie. They were about to go to the office, and in that sort of a formal attire, also they couldn't stop themselves from touching the car and feeling the smoothness of the fur. So yeah, so this tactile value was also a part of my piece. Then it was such an exciting experience with Kalagoda. My piece directly interacting with anyone and everyone on the street. This had never happened before because my artwork was closed into specific commercial environments before that. So this became really like an exciting exercise, which I continued for. I've been doing it for the last 12 years now. So the second, I had a piece called Ambassador. So Ambassador is again, it's made like a mobile temple. So being brought up in an environment of a temple, this actually narrates an experience I had with an in the south of India, where I was made to stand in a queue, and systematically the authorities of the temple made sure squeezed out of all his money by the time he enters inside the temple, be it charges for the darshanam, tickets for the darshanam or prasadam and stuff like that, the offerings to the god and things like that. Really upset by this kind of a practice where I had found educated people who were priests and they were engaging in this sort of a practice in a spiritual environment. Was something wrong, I felt. And so this was kind of a reaction to malpractices inside of a temple. Now, for me, it was like a challenge to exhibit this because I came from the family of the temple. And that's why, I had named it Ambassador, which says that the guy who's an MBA who's become a priest now should be afraid of the god, Ambassador. And of course, it was an ambassador car, which is my favorite car. So this was again a big hit. So by the time I had done this car, I had already become popular. And so the next year, so one problem I faced is whenever I met people and they ask me, what do you do? And I try to explain them, they don't understand. So I tell them about the Kalagoda ambassador and they get it and they start showing me pictures or selfies they've taken from their phone against my ambassador car. So this kind of became my identity, but they didn't know that I'm the one who's behind it. So I said, next year in the installation, it has to be an answer to that. And that's why I made this piece called Make Me Famous. So it's like a brand ambassador covered with dome mirrors. And I had my posters on the sides. So these mirrors actually reflect my face. So when you take a picture of this, my face comes along with it. Yeah. Then we had another issue I wanted to deal with is the dynamics of art and money. And so the next one is called Make Me Rich. And this talks about, it's basically based on the fate of some artists who kind of had a challenging old age and they died poor. And after their death, their artwork started fetching crores, which was never useful to them. So it talks about the poor artist syndrome. And, I thought there's a time for change. Artist is usually considered as a good artist is considered as a poor guy, he is talented, but people like to see him as a poor guy with a jhola. And even artists are convinced that they should be like that. But I felt there has to be a change of mindset. So this piece talks about that. It's completely covered with coins on it. And so it talks about Make Me Rich. Then there is Acres of Diamonds. It was covered with black sort of charcoal when it comes to the festival. And there was a story written on it, inspiring story. And if you like it, you put a diamond on it. If you feel inspired, you put the diamond, which is actually a Swarovski crystal. So when it went back, it was glittering with diamonds. So many people got inspired by this story. It wasn't story, but it was a very popular story called Acres of Diamonds that I had read and I shared it on the card. Then the next one we had is, so there was Lal. So Lal was completely covered with kumkum and it was based on Lal that he had bought a loan. His death, his wife. This is a salute to the commitment she had for her husband. The bond that she shared with her husband is kind of shown by the medium which is used, that is kumkum. And kumkum also does a dual play of the red color, that is Lal and Lal Bahadur Shastri's name. So yeah. The next one is your genes of Khari. So this talks about, this is actually for the 150th year of Mahatma Gandhi. And it talks about the relevance of Gandhian values today. So half car is covered with genes representing the youth today, the genes which is the denim. and the other half is covered with Khari that talks about the Gandhian values. So both these fabrics come together on this car, and digging deep into the DNA of both the fabrics, I found that both these fabrics have a very contrasting personality. In fact, completely opposite personality. If you talk about the youth today, the jeans, the denim, the values they carry, and the Gandhian values and the khadi wearing people, completely contrasting personality. But digging down deep, you realize that both the fabrics are made of the same cotton yarn. Their DNA is the same. And that's where there is a chance of bridging the gap to kind of make Gandhian values relevant today. And that was the effort behind this car called Jeans of Khadi, where jeans is spelled with G rather than J. And then we come to this piece, which is a little unique because I was commissioned by the Dharavi Biennale to create a piece for them. And it's basically a triptych, it's 3 sculptures. This is the first one. The piece is called God, Geode, also called as Genius of Dharavi, where this man is an archer. And this piece actually is based on my experience with some people of Dharavi who worked in my studio, not graduated from an art school or anything, but they were very, very strict. They came up with out of the box stories and materials and solutions. So this particular piece is has actually got these arrows, and the feather in the arrows show different logos. So, I've seen people counterfeiting the logos, the brands in Dharavi and selling their products. I agree that counterfeiting is illegal, but at the level of Dharavi where people are almost starving, they need a street smart way of surviving. They manage to kind of elevate the image of their product by kind of renaming their brand, which is very similar to a popular brand. Like I found some chappals called Bindas, and they were actually designed. The logo was actually designed very similar to Adidas, and like Nike, there was Nair, and like Power, there was Pawar, and there was Lee Kapoor instead of Lee Cooper. So, I found this idea really fascinating, and it talks about recycling of the brand. So Dharavi is basically famous and popular for recycling, and these people have gone to the level of recycling the existing brand. I think it was quite an interesting twist in the whole game, which I've exhibited here. The next image shows how the community of Dharavi is very, very connected together. Different religions are connected together because they stay very, very close to each other. So they have also recycled the idea of religion and community. Their community believes in the religion of recycle. So recycling is basically the religion there. The next one. And this is the third piece, very similar to other two, but it's golden in color. This actually says that even the Oscar has gone to Dharavi. So India didn't get the Oscar. Slumdog Millionaire talks about Dharavi and the story from Dharavi. And the Oscar went to Dharavi. So it's similar to the golden statue that you have. The same archer, again, the feathers behind are basically flags of different countries. So basically it's gone international. So Dharavi is probably more popular than the image of India because of the idea of recycling and how the livelihood happens there. Yeah. So this was kind of done as a piece for Dharavi Biennale. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, it was quite something. So that's a little bit about my work that I've been doing all these years. Krishnaraj.
All right, Hetal, a very interesting insight or an initial talk on what you have been doing. So let me ask you, since we have been, running these kind of sessions during the pandemic to address challenges of these times, especially that of livelihood. So how do you think your creativity or your art space could help or motivate others during these times?
So first of all, art is a passionate practice. Unlike a stock market trading course or any other course, it's not very directly cashable sort of a skill. But the currency is satisfaction. It can definitely elevate your feelings, and it can energize you in a different way. So that's the first thing. And of course, there are ways that different people, different artists monetize their artwork and skills, which I will narrate. But very first thing is that if art is started with an intention of generating income, it's not as straightforward as you might find in the other programs that you normally do pick up in a month and you start trading at a stock market. Having said that, I've had a fairly sort of a successful career, I would say, because earning as an artist has always been a challenge. One of the biggest challenge an artist faces is it's not like other business where there is a constant cash flow. So what I have skills along with some practices like architectural practice, and adding value there, and that becomes sort of a business model, rather than a standalone art piece, which I also do for my exhibition and my satisfaction. But it's not necessary that that piece will fit into a particular space.
I thought we just lost you there, Hetal.